Beneath the weight of desert air and the endless gaze of a crimson scene, secrets lie waiting. In Egypt, every whispering grain of sand and every carved stone carries stories older than memory. Imagine embarking on a journey where ancient pharaohs speak through crumbling hieroglyphs and forgotten cities rise from the depths of the sea. This is not a museum lecture or a dry history lesson. This is a cinematic voyage through time. We'll brush the dust from vanished armies, lost tombs, and enigmatic artifacts. Keep your mind open and your senses sharp. The mysteries of the Nile are calling, and our adventure is about to begin. The lost army of Cambyses. They marched out into the western desert beneath a sun that promised no mercy. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II is said to have sent an army of 50,000 men to punish the priests of the oracle at Siwa for refusing to legitimize his rule. For 7 days, the column trekked west across the endless dunes. Then, somewhere beyond the oasis of Karga, a Khamsin rose from the Sahara, swallowing soldiers, horses, and supplies in a blizzard of sand. No one returned. The tale of Cambyses' lost army became part myth, part warning. The desert keeps its own secrets. Centuries later, European explorers and modern archaeologists tried to follow the phantom route. In the 1980s, expeditions traced Herodotus's account but found little more than shards of pottery and camel tracks. In 2009, 2 Italian adventurers announced that they had discovered bronze weapons arrowheads and human bones near the Gilf Kebir Plateau, claiming these remains belonged to Cambyses' soldiers. Egypt's authorities quickly disputed the finding, noting that the artifacts were likely much later in origin. The desert, it seemed, still refused to yield its dead. In 2015, a Dutch Egyptologist offered a new explanation. Perhaps there had never been a sandstorm at all. He argued that the Persians were ambushed and annihilated by a rebel pharaoh named Petubastis III, who used the cover of the desert to hide his forces and lure Cambyses' men into a trap. The legend of a storm burying the army may have been Persian propaganda, meant to mask an embarrassing defeat. It's a theory that strips away some of the supernatural, yet it replaces one mystery with another. How did an obscure local ruler manage such a feat against the mighty Achaemenid Empire? Today, satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar search for traces of bivouacs or mass graves. Bedouin guides still speak of cursed dunes, where you can hear the clatter of ghostly chariots on windy nights. Did 50,000 men really disappear beneath a wall of sand? Or did they fall victim to a clever guerrilla king and a story crafted to protect imperial pride until someone unearths a regiment's worth of bones or weapons far out in the Sahara? Cambyses' lost army remains an enigma that blurs the line between history and legend. The tomb of Antony and Cleopatra, in the final act of their tragic love story, Cleopatra pressed an asp to her breast, and Mark Antony fell on his sword. Octavian spared the couple further humiliation, and so the ancient writers say granted them the dignity of a shared burial. Somewhere in Alexandria, under the gaze of an Isis temple and within reach of the sea, their bodies were interred. Then history snapped the thread. Earthquakes and rising waters reshaped the delta palaces, crumbled into the bay, and the resting place of Egypt's last pharaoh vanished from the map. Modern archaeologists have been chasing phantoms ever since. Divers have mapped submerged columns and sphinxes that once lined Cleopatra's royal quarter. On land excavations at Taposiris Magna, a windswept temple complex west of Alexandria, have uncovered coins bearing the queen's profile, carved stelae, and mummy-filled shafts. Could this be the site where the lovers were sealed away? The finds hint at a royal presence, but skeptics point out that Egyptians never buried kings and queens within active temples. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former antiquities chief, describes the idea as romantic but improbable. The mystery deepens with every turn. Some historians argue that the tomb lies under modern Alexandria itself, entombed beneath streets and apartment blocks. Others suspect it may have been swallowed by the Mediterranean during the earthquake of 365 CE, when tidal waves washed across the city. Legends whisper that Cleopatra's mausoleum was modeled on a lighthouse, its beacon guiding her soul to the afterlife. Until now, these are just shadows cast by torches on ancient walls. As technology advances, hope flickers anew. Sonar scans reveal intriguing anomalies beneath the harbor. Ground-penetrating radar picks up voids beneath temples once dedicated to Isis. Each discovery brings us closer but also teases the imagination. Imagine a vaulted chamber, the gilded sarcophagus of a queen beside her Roman lover, sealed by stone and salt for 2 millennia. Will the tomb, if it exists, ever be found, or has it been claimed forever by the shifting sands and tides? The search for Antony and Cleopatra's final embrace continues, a real-life treasure hunt, woven from love, power, and the inexorable march of time. The unknown mother of Tutankhamun. Deep beneath the sands of the Valley of the Kings, a quiet chamber yielded a secret that would baffle Egyptologists for more than a century. In 1898, when French archaeologist Victor Loret broke into Tomb KV 35, he found a cache of royal mummies hidden away during ancient times. Among them was a slender female, her features hacked away by vandals or priests, her chest open to the elements. The broken face meant there was no golden mask to identify her, no hieroglyphs to proclaim her titles. She was placed in an annex behind 2 other bodies and became known simply as the Younger Lady. For decades she lay anonymous, her linen shroud hiding a story the ancients had tried to erase. Then modern science intervened. In the early 2000s, CT scans and DNA analysis were performed on the royal mummies of the 18th dynasty. The results were astonishing. The Younger Lady turned out to be the biological mother of Tutankhamun and the daughter of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and his queen Tai. That made her a full sister to the KV-55 mummy, widely believed to be the heretic king Akhenaten. The world suddenly had a genetic profile but still lacked a name. Speculation immediately turned to Nefertiti, Akhenaten's famous great royal wife. Could the enigmatic queen have been Tutankhamun's mother? The evidence argues Nefertiti was never recorded as a king's daughter, and thus could not be the child of Amenhotep III. Scholars turned instead to lesser-known princesses Nebeta and Bekhtaten, royal daughters, whose images appear in palace reliefs, but whose lives are poorly documented. Each fits parts of the puzzle, but leaves crucial gaps. Nebeta fades from records before Akhenaten's reign. Bekhtaten may have died young. The Younger Lady raises more questions than she answers. Why was her face destroyed? Was it an act of vengeance or a ritual defacement meant to deprive her of recognition in the afterlife? Why was she reburied in haste alongside others far from her original tomb? Was she involved in the turbulent religious revolution of Akhenaten, and did she pay a price for it? Her DNA ties her to some of the most powerful figures of her era, yet her name and deeds have been swallowed by history. Until inscriptions or new evidence come to light, we can only conjure her visage from fragments and wonder about the forgotten woman who gave birth to Egypt's boy king. The helicopter hieroglyph. In a shadowed hall at Abydos, the past seems to wink slyly at the present. Carved high on a sandstone architrave in the Temple of Seti, Psen are hieroglyphs that at first glance look eerily familiar to modern eyes. One shape resembles a helicopter complete with rotor and tail. Another could be read as a jet or a hovering spacecraft. For decades, photographs of these carvings have fueled feverish speculation on late-night radio shows and internet forums. Did the Egyptians know about flying machines? Were these images proof of time travelers or visitors from the stars? The story is magnetic. It invites us to imagine ancient priests gazing skyward at machines, zipping across the blue, recording what they saw in stone. But to those who know how Egyptian temples were built and reused, the truth is far more earthly and no less fascinating. The helicopter hieroglyph is not a single carving at all, but two. When Seti I to commission the temple in the 13th century BCE, his artisans inscribed titles and names honoring him. Decades later, his son Ramesses II ordered his own titles carved directly over his father's chiseling shallow depressions into the existing reliefs. Over millennia, the plaster filling between the two layers eroded away, leaving a palimpsest, a composite image where old and new glyphs overlap. To modern eyes and through the lens of a photograph, the overlapping signs create shapes that mimic our machines. This is pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find patterns and familiar forms in random or ambiguous images. It's the same trick that makes us see faces in clouds or animals in tree bark. In the case of Abydos, it has given birth to an entire subgenre of pseudo-archaeology. Books and documentaries speak of ancient aliens, lost civilizations with advanced technology, secret knowledge suppressed by academia. They ignore the other countless carvings in the temple that clearly belong to the lexicon of Egyptian writing. Yet, there's something undeniably enchanting about standing beneath those weathered glyphs, feeling the weight of history and the tug of imagination. The misread helicopter reminds us that our perception is shaped by our experience. We project our world onto the past, and in doing so, sometimes miss the genuine marvels of ancient ingenuity, the precise masonry, the astronomical alignments, the art. So the next time you see the Abydos carvings in a meme or a conspiracy video, remember there is a story behind the story. It is a tale not of flying machines, but of how time layers meaning upon meaning, inviting us to look closer and think deeper about what we think we see. The Sphinx without a nose. Under a sky the color of old parchment, the great Sphinx peers eastward with an enigmatic smile and a conspicuous absence. Where a proud nose once protruded, now gapes a rough-edged hole nearly a meter wide. Tour guides spin tales that Napoleon's soldiers used the statue for target practice, blasting its face with cannon fire. Others whisper that the missing nose is proof of a campaign to erase the features of ancient Africans. Reality, as ever, is more complex and perhaps more intriguing. Historical drawings made in 1737 depict the Sphinx already noseless decades before Napoleon set foot in Egypt. Chisel marks around the cavity reveal that someone deliberately inserted tools beneath the nostrils and leveraged the nose off. Medieval Arab chroniclers tell of Muhammad Sa'am al-Dar, a Sufi zealot who, offended by villagers leaving offerings at the monument, climbed the massive paws in 1378 and struck the face. For defacing a sacred guardian, legend has it, he was hanged for vandalism. The broken nose then became a magnet for myth-making. Beyond the facial injury, the Sphinx has inspired other controversies. In the 1990s, a handful of researchers proposed that deep vertical grooves on its body were caused not by wind-blown sand, but by torrential rain, suggesting the monument could be thousands of years older than Khafre's reign. If correct, it would upend our timeline of Egyptian civilization. Most geologists and Egyptologists rebut this water erosion hypothesis, pointing out that the limestone bedrock naturally weathers into such patterns under wind, and that the Sphinx enclosure shows clear signs of quarry marks contemporaneous with the Fourth Dynasty. Evidence of cause and effect tends to favor the mainstream chronology. And then there is the rumored Hall of Records, an underground library said to hold the wisdom of Atlantis or survivors of a lost civilization. In the 1980s and 90s, psychic readings and New Age literature claimed a hidden chamber lay beneath the Sphinx's paws. Drilling and seismic surveys were conducted. Nothing but natural cavities were found. Yet the idea persists as powerful and alluring as the gaze of the monument itself. Perhaps that is the true magic of the Sphinx. Even without its nose, it invites us to imagine stories layered atop stone. We project our hopes and fears, our longing for lost knowledge onto its timeless face. Its missing feature becomes a canvas for myth, a reminder that absence can be as evocative as presence. As the first rays of dawn gild its weathered brow, the Sphinx keeps its own counsel, guarding the plateau and the secrets we so desperately want it to tell. The shadows of Dendera. Deep within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, hidden in chambers that once echoed with chants and the scent of incense, a set of carved reliefs glows softly in torchlight. The scenes seem otherworldly. A snake undulates inside an oval pod, held aloft by priests. A lotus blossom sprouts from an altar like a mysterious apparatus. To the untrained eye, the images look strikingly like giant light bulbs emitting beams of energy. For decades, these carvings have electrified the imaginations of alternative historians. Did the ancient Egyptians harness electricity? Were they illuminating their corridors with incandescent lamps long before Edison? The idea took root in the 1960s when proponents of the ancient astronaut theory circulated photographs of the Dendera reliefs alongside schematics of cathode ray tubes. They pointed to the absence of soot on tomb ceilings as evidence that torches or oil lamps could not have been used. With a leap of faith and a dash of sci-fi, the reliefs became proof of a lost technology, perhaps inherited from a forgotten civilization or gifted by visitors from beyond. The reality, as interpreted by Egyptologists, is rooted in myth, not science. The so-called light bulb depicts the creation story of Harsomptis, a form of the god Horus. In the scene, Harsomptis appears as a serpent emerging from a lotus flower, symbolizing the birth of the sun from the primordial waters. The oval bulb is actually a womb, or cosmic bubble, encasing the divine serpent. The pillar supporting it represents the Djed column, a symbol of stability and Osiris. No copper wires or electrodes adorn these scenes, and the lack of soot. It can be explained by mirrored sunlight reeds soaked in oil that produce minimal smoke or simply careful ventilation. Still, the Dendera reliefs capture something of the timeless human desire to see our own technology reflected in ancient art. Like a Rorschach test, we project our understanding onto enigmatic images. Maybe that's why the idea of Egyptian light bulbs persists. It feeds into a narrative of lost knowledge and universal wisdom. Imagine walking through those corridors 2,000 years ago, torchlight flickering over blue and gold paint priests reciting hymns to Hathor. Would those carvings have seemed like machines or like stories made stone? As long as the serpent coils within its oval on the wall, the Dendera light will continue to glow in the minds of those who look for hidden messages in the past. It invites us to question not only what we see, but how we see, and reminds us that the greatest illuminations often come from understanding the culture that created the art, not bending the art to fit our modern myths. The enigma of the Sabu disc. In a quiet gallery of the Egyptian Museum, far from the golden splendor of Tutankhamun, sits a modest artifact that has perplexed archaeologists and engineers alike. It's a thin bowl of polished schist, roughly 55 centimeters in diameter, carved with 3 gently arcing fins that converge on a central hub. The object was found in 1936 in the tomb of Sabu, a high official from Egypt's first dynasty. Its age is staggering nearly 5,000 years, and yet its form looks uncannily modern, like the rotor of a turbine or a propeller blade from a machine that has no business in the Bronze Age. We know little about Sabu himself beyond his title as chief of the butchers and perhaps a priest. He was buried with the usual collection of pots and stone vessels, but the disc had no inscriptions to tell us what it was. Some scholars initially thought it was a ceremonial tray or incense burner. Others suggested it was an oil lamp designed to hold 3 wicks, its lobes cupping flames that reflected off the stone in a hypnotic dance. The central hole might have held a stand or a supporting rod. Still, those explanations didn't satisfy the curiosity of those who saw in its sleek lines the aesthetics of aerodynamics. In recent years, the Sabu disc has become a darling of fringe theories. Books and videos touted as proof of advanced prehistoric technology, an out-of-place artifact left behind by a forgotten civilization, or even extraterrestrials. To test such ideas, engineers have recreated the disc with modern materials. One aerospace team produced a 3D printed version and found that when spun, it does produce lift, but it also wobbles violently and would shatter at speed. As a propeller, it fails. As a lamp, it works. The stone from which the original was carved, meta-gray whack, is brittle and would crack under rotational stress. The object is both ingeniously crafted and firmly rooted in the capabilities of its time. Perhaps that is where its power lies. The disc invites us to marvel at the craftsmanship of artisans who shaped hard stone into something so delicate. It reminds us that beauty and mystery do not require alien intervention. They often arise from human creativity meeting material challenge. Was it a piece of ritual equipment, a symbol of the cosmos with 3 swirling arms representing the primordial waters, or simply a sophisticated bowl? The tomb of Sabu offers no answers and the disc whispers no secrets. Its very ambiguity allows our imaginations to spin, reflecting our own desires to discover lost wisdom in the silent stones of antiquity. The Lost Labyrinth of Hawara. Imagine standing before a structure so vast that even Herodotus, who witnessed the pyramids, wrote that it surpassed them. Near the oasis of Fayum, in the shadow of the pyramid of Amenemhat III, once stood Egypt's legendary labyrinth. Ancient Greek writers described a complex of 12 courts, endless corridors, and 3,000 chambers, half of them hidden underground. Priests refused to show visitors the lower levels, saying they housed the tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles. Strabo likened it to a palace multiplied as many times as there were gnomes in Egypt, each region represented in stone. Today, nothing of that grandeur rises above the ground. Centuries of quarrying, earthquakes, and floods reduced the labyrinth to a field of tumbled blocks. When 19th century travelers arrived, they found little more than mounds of debris. Flinders Petrie, the meticulous British archaeologist, excavated at Hawara in 1888. He uncovered foundations and fragments of reliefs that confirmed the labyrinth existed, but revealed that most of its superstructure had been stripped for building materials in antiquity. The floor plan suggested a central courtyard surrounded by colonnaded halls, possibly used for administrative purposes and cult rituals. It was impressive, but it did not match Herodotus's description of a sprawling maze. Why the discrepancy? So, one possibility is that the labyrinth the Greeks saw included an enormous mud brick superstructure that has long since melted back into the Nile silt. Another is that Herodotus and his contemporaries were guided through a portion of the complex designed to overawe foreigners. The sensation of being lost might have been as much theatrical as architectural. It's also possible that stories grew in the telling. 3,000 rooms may have been shorthand for many rooms, much as we might call a towering skyscraper, a mile high without measuring. The allure of the labyrinth has inspired treasure hunters and esoteric thinkers. Some claim it hides secret libraries or records of Atlantis. Others imagine it as a ceremonial map of the underworld. Modern geophysical surveys have detected anomalies beneath the site that could be walls or voids, but the water table has risen, making excavation difficult. Until someone develops a way to probe deeper without flooding the site, Hawara's underground passages will remain out of reach. Whether the labyrinth was a literal maze or a poetic exaggeration, its memory endures. It symbolizes our fascination with hidden knowledge and our fear of being swallowed by the unknown. Standing on the windswept plain where it once stood, one can almost hear footsteps echoing in stone corridors and the quiet voice of a priest saying, "This far and no farther." The labyrinth beckons, but its secrets sleep beneath layers of time, waiting for the day when curiosity and technology align to awaken them. In search of the land of Punt, for centuries Egyptian reliefs have shown elegant ships laden with treasures, gold, ebony, ivory, incense, exotic animals, and strange plants. These scenes depict voyages to Ta-Netjer, God's land, better known to us as Punt. Priests called it a blessed realm, where myrrh trees grew like weeds and gods walked among men. Its queen was famously portrayed in the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, with a rounded belly and extravagant jewelry, greeting Egyptian envoys beneath incense-laden boughs. Punt was a place of wonders, a trading partner crucial to Egypt's wealth and ritual life. Yet its location has remained one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. The Egyptians sent expeditions to Punt as early as the Old Kingdom, sailing along the Red Sea in ships built from cedar and lashed with rope. They returned with fragrant resins burned in temples, wild baboons that became pets of the pharaohs, and stories of a land rich in abundance. Later inscriptions describe Punt as behind the Myrrh Lakes and to the east of the land of the god. But these poetic directions have been interpreted in many ways. Was Punt on the Arabian Peninsula? In modern-day Somalia, Ethiopia, along the Sudanese coast, each hypothesis has passionate advocates. Modern science has joined the debate. Researchers have studied the isotopic signatures in baboon mummies found in Egyptian tombs, comparing them to living populations. The results suggest the animals originated from the Horn of Africa, possibly Eritrea or Ethiopia. Geological analyses of ancient resins and wood point in the same direction. But the evidence is not definitive. Without a known port or city, we are left piecing together a puzzle from aromatic clues and pictorial records. The romance of Punt lies partly in its duality. To the Egyptians, it was a real place of commerce, yet its name, Land of the Gods, imbued it with mythic status. It existed at the boundary of the known world, both geographical and spiritual. When Hatshepsut sent her famous expedition, she carved the story in stone rowers, straining at their oars, captains taking soundings, soldiers carrying myrrh saplings root-bound in baskets. It reads as both logbook and hymn. Even today, the concept of a lost kingdom rich in spices and gold captures our imagination. We dream of stumbling upon an ancient harbor buried beneath sand or jungle, where pottery shards and hieroglyphic graffiti prove that Egyptians once walked there. Will satellite imagery someday reveal ancient canals in a forgotten wadi? Or will the land of Punt remain a place we can only visit through the eyes of pharaohs and the scent of burning incense? Until archaeology answers, Punt stays suspended between fact and fable, a reminder of how much of the ancient world still lies just beyond our reach. The pharaoh without a name, in the heart of the valley of the king's tomb. KV-55 sits like an unmarked letter in a royal archive, its contents anonymous yet explosive. Discovered in 1907, the tomb was a strange mix of opulence and haste, and plaster seals bore the names of Akhenaten Taye and Smenkhkare. Gilded panels had been ripped from a coffin, leaving bare wood and exposed joinery. Inside lay a single mummy, desiccated and damaged, its gold mask long removed, its arms crossed in the pose of a pharaoh. Around him were dismantled shrines, shattered canopic jars, and a carved box inscribed for Queen Tai. The puzzle pieces didn't seem to fit, and so began one of Egyptology's most enduring whodunits. Early scholars thought the occupant might be Queen Tai herself. Then X-rays revealed male anatomy. Some proposed Smenkhkare, the obscure co-regent of Akhenaten. Others said the mummy was Akhenaten, the heretic king who abandoned Amun for the Sundisk Aten. Yet the bones appeared too young. The man in KV-55 seemed to have died in his early 20s, while Akhenaten reigned at least 17 years. Had the bones been misjudged? Did they even belong to the same coffin? The plot thickened when artifacts bearing different cartouches were found in the same chamber. It looked as if royal bodies had been relocated during political upheaval, hurriedly stored together, and partially dismantled to reuse precious materials. Modern DNA analysis has brought clarity and controversy. Tests indicate the KV-55 mummy is both the son of Amenhotep III and the father of Tutankhamun, making him a close relative to those luminaries. That profile fits Akhenaten best, suggesting the heretic king was indeed reburied in KV-55 during the backlash against his monotheistic revolution. However, age estimates from skeletal analysis still bother some researchers who insist the bones belong to a much younger man, perhaps Smenkhkare, whom history barely remembers. The question becomes, did Akhenaten die younger than once thought, or have we misread the data? The tomb itself hints at turmoil. The coffin's gold face was torn away, likely in antiquity, suggesting deliberate desecration. The remains of other individuals may have been removed, leaving only this one mummy as a relic of a complex reburial process. KV-55 reads like a hurried attempt by priests to rescue royal ancestors during a time of religious and political backlash. Each detail speaks of intrigue, names erased, bones moved, identities blurred. As research continues, the identity of the KV-55 pharaoh oscillates between near certainty and tantalizing doubt. Is this the face now gone of the revolutionary who built Akhenaten? Or is it a forgotten prince caught in the crossfire of family politics? Until future discoveries tip the scales, the mummy will remain the ruler with no cartouche, a monarch whose story is written in bones and whispers. The boy king and the curse. He ruled for only a decade, yet Tutankhamun has become the most famous pharaoh on earth. Ascending the throne as a child after the religious chaos of Akhenaten, he spent his short reign restoring temples and traditional gods. At around 18, he died abruptly. His burial was hurried, his tomb small and strangely crowded. For more than 3,000 years, his name vanished into the sands until Howard Carter's lantern flickered over a sealed door in 1922. The discovery of that intact royal tomb electrified the world and birthed a legend of its own, the curse of the pharaohs. The mummy of Tutankhamun tells a story written in bone and tissue. CT scans reveal he suffered from a broken leg, possibly from a fall or accident that became infected. Genetic tests indicate he had malaria. These combined ailments could have overwhelmed even a king with the best physicians of his age. There is no evidence of a blow to the head or foul play. The dramatic murder theories spurred by a hole in his skull have been debunked as post-mortem damage. Yet the absence of drama in his death has not dulled the drama around his tomb. When Lord Carnarvon, the aristocrat who financed Carter's dig, died from an infected mosquito bite in Cairo shortly after the tomb was opened, newspapers seized on the coincidence. Other deaths, an American tourist who visited the tomb and died of pneumonia, an X-ray technician who succumbed to illness, were woven into a narrative that the boy king's wrath reached beyond the grave. Stories told of canaries eaten by cobras and inscriptions warning of death to trespassers. In truth, no such curse was inscribed in Tutankhamun's tomb. Egyptians occasionally wrote threats against tomb robbers, but these usually called for legal punishment, not supernatural vengeance. Modern explanations for the string of ailments vary. Some scholars suggest ancient tombs harbor dangerous molds or bacteria that, when released, can sicken those who breathe in the spores. Others note that early 20th century excavations lacked antibiotics and proper safety measures. Infection could spread quickly. A few have proposed naturally occurring radioactive elements in the tomb's limestone as a culprit. Whatever the cause, the idea of a pharaoh reaching across time resonates. We are drawn to the notion that violating sacred space carries consequences that the past can push back. As you descend into Tutankhamun's tomb today, electric light revealing the blue and gold of the boy king's coffin, you cannot escape the feeling of stepping into a story. The air is dry and still, but the walls hum with narratives layered over millennia, of a teenager thrust into power of modern men, enthralled by treasure of headlines that transformed misfortune into myth. Did the king curse those who disturbed him? Or did we weave the curse because we need to believe some ancient magic lingers in the bones of kings? The answer may be psychological as much as archaeological, leaving each visitor to decide whether the curse is real or a mirror of our own fears. Secrets within the Great Pyramid. Its silhouette is the very symbol of Egypt, four smooth sides rising out of the desert, pointing to a sky that has watched over it for 4.5 millennia. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is not just a monument, it is a riddle wrapped in limestone, built from more than 2 million blocks, each weighing as much as 30 tons. It stands as the tallest man-made structure of the ancient world. To this day, how it was constructed and what lies inside continue to captivate scientists and dreamers alike. Close inspection of the basalt and granite blocks around the pyramid reveals telltale grooves, deep even cuts that would have required a saw 15 feet long, with copper teeth, perhaps weighted with sand or grit, and operated by teams of workers pulling in rhythm. This super saw evokes images of sweat and coordination, an engineering feat of its own. It contradicts the notion that pyramid builders used only crude tools. Instead, they employed sophisticated techniques scaled to monumental size. Yet, even with this understanding, questions remain. How did they align the pyramid so precisely to true north? What logistics moved such massive stones without wheels or iron? In 2017, technology provided a new twist to the pyramid's tale. The Scan Pyramids project used muon tomography particles, generated by cosmic rays, to peer through the stone. The data revealed a surprising anomaly, a void at least 30 meters long above the Grand Gallery. The chamber is inaccessible and unlike any known passage. Is it a relieving space created to reduce stress on the gallery roof? Or is it a hidden corridor, perhaps intended for rituals or yet to be filled with something? Some call it the Big Void, and it has reignited speculation about secret chambers and treasures. Authorities caution against romanticism, but the absence of a definitive answer feeds the imagination. Then there are the so-called air shafts, narrow conduits that angle upward from the king's and queen's chambers. Once thought to ventilate the tomb for workers, they may have symbolic significance pointing towards certain stars associated with resurrection. Modern explorers have sent robots up these shafts, revealing doors with copper handles and tiny carvings. Each discovery seems to solve one puzzle only to reveal another. Of course, no discussion of the Great Pyramid would be complete without acknowledging the wilder theories that it was built by Atlanteans aliens or a lost civilization with advanced technology. These ideas persist because the pyramid's scale and precision feel almost superhuman. The truth is likely more human, and therefore more impressive, a testament to what careful planning, collective labor, and ingenuity can achieve. Standing at the base of Khufu's pyramid as dusk falls, it's easy to see why this monument has inspired so many questions. The limestone glows peach in the fading light, then shadows pool in its niches, and the desert wind carries away whispered conjectures. Is there a hidden chamber above your head? What secrets did the builders intend to seal within these stones? For now, the pyramid answers only with silence, inviting us to keep asking and to marvel at the mystery carved into its heart. The stone giants of Saqqara. Down a sloping passage carved deep into the bedrock of Saqqara lies a subterranean world that once thundered with hooves and ritual chants. This is the Serapeum, the necropolis of the Apis bull, an animal worshipped as the earthly manifestation of Ptah and later associated with Osiris. For centuries, priests mummified the sacred bulls and interred them in grand stone coffins. When Auguste Mariette rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, he found galleries stretching hundreds of meters, punctuated by side chambers housing massive sarcophagi. Each of these granite boxes measured over 4 meters long and weighed up to 60 tons. Their polished surfaces glowed in the flickering candlelight like black mirrors. Their lids alone weighed as much as 25 tons. How were such giants carved, transported, and lowered into place in these confined spaces? The sarcophagi were made of hard stone, granite, basalt, diorite, quarried in Aswan, and transported down the Nile. At the Serapeum, workers used ramps, rollers, and sledges to move the blocks through the desert. Once at the site, they filled the burial chambers with sand. To create a level surface, slid the sarcophagus in horizontally, and then gradually removed the sand to lower the box into its recess. Evidence of rope holes, wear patterns, and tool marks supports this laborious process. The logistics required precision and manpower, but no lost technology. Only 4 of the surviving coffins bear inscriptions. Most are blank, their smooth walls reflecting the flickering light of torches during burial ceremonies. In recent decades, these boxes have become fodder for speculation. Some fringe writers call them black boxes, claiming they are energy storage devices or remnants of a forgotten high-tech civilization. They point to the near-perfect polish and say such precision could only be achieved with advanced tools. Egyptologists counter that with patience, hard stone can be worked to a high sheen using pounding stones, abrasives, and sand. The box's interiors show chisel marks and imperfections. They are finely made, but within the realm of ancient craftsmanship. The Serapeum itself adds to the atmosphere of mystery. Many of the chambers were found looted with bull mummies pulled apart and stones piled on sarcophagi in acts of desecration. Only 2 burials remained intact when Mariette arrived, yielding rich funerary goods and inscriptions that helped establish Egyptian chronologies. But the majority of bulls' names were scratched away, leaving us with questions about who did the vandalism and why. Was it an act of iconoclasm following a religious revolution? Or simply tomb robbers venting frustration at being locked out of the true treasures? Walking through the Serapeum today, the air heavy with centuries of silence, one feels the weight of the stone coffins and of the past itself. The coffins sit in orderly rows, lids eschew their emptiness, both literal and metaphorical. They speak of a civilization that could tame stone and make it sacred. Yet they also invite us to imagine what else might have been hidden in these vaults before Thebes and time had their way. Are there passages yet unexplored burials that escaped plunder? The stone giants of Saqqara keep their secrets resting in the half-light, awaiting those brave enough and skilled enough to unlock the stories etched into their massive forms. The giant that never stood in the granite quarries of Aswan, where pink stone catches the sun and shimmers, lies an enormous monolith still tethered to the earth that birthed it. The unfinished obelisk rests in a trench carved by ancient hands. Had it been completed, it would have stood over 40 meters high and weighed more than 1,000 tons, making it the largest single obelisk ever attempted. Instead, it remains horizontal, one side partly hewn, the other fused to bedrock. The giant was abandoned mid-birth when hairline fractures appeared, rendering it useless for the ceremonial role for which it was intended. Walking along the cut channel, one can see chisel marks and narrow trenches where workers inserted wooden wedges. They would soak these with water, letting expansion cleave the granite. Dolerite pounding stones litter the quarry, their rounded shapes testifying to countless blows. Ochre lines painted on the surface mark where cuts were planned, frozen in time like an unfinished sketch. The project likely dates to the reign of Queen Hatshepsut, who had a penchant for erecting colossal obelisks as symbols of her divine authority. Some scholars propose it was meant to accompany the Lateran obelisk, now in Rome, or to adorn the Temple of Karnak. The obelisk's incompletion offers a rare window into ancient engineering. It shows that quarries were not chaotic pits, but organized work sites, with measured cuts and planned sequences. It reveals that even in failure, there is valuable information. The crack that doomed the monolith exposes the grain of the granite and the risks inherent in extracting such large pieces. The fact that the stone was left in place suggests a pragmatic decision. Removing it would have required immense effort for no gain. Instead, the Egyptians moved on, leaving the obelisk as an accidental monument to ambition and technology. Inevitably, the unfinished obelisk has attracted myth. Some claim it proves that the ancients attempted projects beyond their capabilities, hinting at lost techniques. Fringe theorists imagine sonic tools or anti-gravity devices. In reality, the scale itself is the marvel. Using simple tools, human labor, and ingenuity, the builders could coax enormous forms from bedrock. When a flaw appeared, they accepted defeat and directed their energies elsewhere, perhaps learning from the experience. Their process teaches patience and respect for materials. Today, visitors tread wooden walkways around the monolith, peering into its trench, touching its rough flank. The obelisk feels like a sleeping giant, waiting for a command to rise. It stirs questions. What ceremonial purpose would it have served? Would its shadow have fallen on a specific temple on a feast day, aligning heaven and earth? Or was it a political statement, a stone exclamation mark, proclaiming a queen's glory? The giant never stood, but its presence still speaks. It tells us that even incomplete dreams can leave a lasting mark, and that sometimes the most revealing relics are those frozen at the moment of failure. The vanishing tomb of Alexander. When Alexander the Great died in Babylon in 323 BCE, his generals fought not only for his empire, but for his body, for the conqueror burial was as political as any battle. Ptolemy stole the funerary procession and took the embalmed king to Memphis, then to his new capital, Alexandria. There, in a glorious mausoleum known as the Soma, Alexander was laid to rest in a coffin of hammered gold. In the centuries that followed, his tomb was visited by the likes of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, and Augustus. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean to pay homage, leaving offerings at the feet of their hero. Then, sometime in late antiquity, the tomb disappeared from history. How does a monument of such import simply vanish? Alexandria itself offers clues. Built on shifting ground between the Mediterranean and Lake Mareotis, the city has been ravaged by earthquakes and tsunamis. Entire districts have sunk beneath the sea. Wars and religious upheavals reshaped the urban landscape. The mausoleum might have been destroyed during rioting. In the 4th or 5th centuries, its stone repurposed, its treasures looted. Or it might lie buried beneath modern streets, sealed off by later construction and forgotten. The search for Alexander's tomb has become an obsession. In the 19th century, Mahmud el-Falaki, Egypt's chief architect, plotted a map of ancient Alexandria and pinpointed a site at the intersection of two grand avenues. Excavations have been repeatedly stymied by overlying buildings and political realities. At the Nabi Daniel Mosque, stories tell of a crypt below the prayer hall holding a king in crystal. Explorers in 1850 and 1879 reported glimpses of granite sarcophagi before being shut down. In 1995, a Greek archaeologist claimed to have found the tomb at Siwa Oasis near the Oracle of Zeus Amun, a place Alexander revered. Experts dismissed the discovery, citing mismatched architecture. More recently, underwater archaeologists have located submerged structures off Alexandria's coastline that may include portions of the Ptolemaic royal quarter, fueling hopes that the tomb lies offshore, entombed in silt. As each lead fades or fails, the legend grows. There are even tales that Venice's relics of Saint Mark are actually Alexander's remains, smuggled away during the Christianization of Alexandria. It's a romantic idea, blending faith and empire, but evidence is thin. The fascination persists because the missing tomb is more than a lost structure, it's a symbol. Finding it would bridge Hellenistic and Egyptian history and perhaps offer insights into Alexander's cult funerary practices and even his appearance. Standing in the bustling streets of modern Alexandria, it's hard to imagine the marble colonnades and golden catafalque where a conqueror slept. Somewhere beneath asphalt or seawater may lie the last puzzle piece of an extraordinary life. Or perhaps the tomb was destroyed, and its absence is a lesson in impermanence. Even the greatest of men can be lost to time. Until a spade or sonar ping proves otherwise, the tomb of Alexander remains a phantom, beckoning archaeologists with the promise of fame and the whisper of the world's most elusive burial. The ghost city of Heracleion. For centuries, sailors told stories of a port city where Greek heroes once tread and wealthy merchants traded gold for papyrus. It was called Thonis by Egyptians and Heracleion by Greeks, a place where Paris and Helen allegedly sought refuge and where Heracles was honored with temples. But by the time Arab geographers charted the Nile Delta, the city was a memory. Its harbors had vanished, swallowed by the sea. Legend said a terrible flood or punishment from the gods sent it beneath the waves. For generations, no one knew where Heracleion lay until the sea gave up its secret. In the late 1990s, French marine archaeologist Franck Gaudiot set out to find the lost city. Guided by ancient texts and modern technology, he and his team scanned the shallow waters off Abu Qir Bay with magnetometers and sonar. The instruments revealed an undersea landscape of walls, channels, and mysterious anomalies. Divers descended and their torches illuminated colossal statues strewn on the seabed, a 5.4-meter dash. High depiction of the god Hapi fragments, of a pharaonic stele, and the masts of ancient ships. Beneath layers of mud lay streets paved with stone lined with the bases of columns and the remains of temples. They had found Thonis Heracleion preserved under silt for more than 1,200 years. The reason for its demise was geological. Built on islands threaded by canals at the mouth of the Nile, The city stood on ground prone to liquefaction, when saturated soil loses its strength and behaves like a liquid under stress. Earthquakes, tidal waves, and rising sea levels weakened the foundations. Around the 2nd century BCE, a combination of disasters triggered a collapse. Buildings sank, some slowly, others suddenly, and the Mediterranean covered what remained. The sand and silt blanketing the ruins protected them from looters and bacteria, creating an underwater time capsule. Artifacts recovered from Herakleion tell a story of multicultural exchange. Greek and Egyptian inscriptions mention taxes collected on goods passing through the port. Coins bear the visages of Ptolemaic kings and queens. Statues depict pharaohs in traditional garb, alongside Greek gods. Sacred barges, jewelry, and everyday objects reveal a cosmopolitan society at the crossroads of the ancient world. The discovery also clarified a long-standing puzzle, two stelae, inscribed with the same decree by Pharaoh Nectanebo, the first one found earlier in Naucratis, and the other in Herakleion, proved that the two city names referred to the same place. Today, underwater archaeologists continue to explore the mud-choked avenues with patience and care, mapping the city and removing artifacts. Their work is painstaking. Each piece must be desalinated and conserved. The bay remains treacherous with shifting sands and poor visibility. Yet the project has transformed our understanding of Egypt's seafaring and its interactions with the wider Mediterranean. Herakleion reminds us that cities can disappear not only in the jungle but beneath the waves. As climate change threatens coastal communities, its story feels newly relevant. It also stokes the imagination. If a city of temples and statues could sleep under the sea for 1,000 years, what else might lie hidden on our ocean floors? The ghost city whispers from its watery grave, urging us to look beneath the surface for history's long forgotten. The missing mummy of Nefertiti. Few faces are as iconic as that of Nefertiti. Her painted limestone bust, with its elongated neck and serene gaze, embodies the beauty and mystique of ancient Egypt. As great royal wife of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, she ruled at his side during one of the most tumultuous and creative periods in the 18th dynasty. Yet, after a dozen years in the spotlight, she disappears from the record. We do not know where or when she died, under what name, or where she was buried. Her mummy has never been definitively identified. That absence has made her one of the most sought-after women in history. The search has taken unexpected turns. In 1898, Victor Loret discovered tomb KV 35 containing a cache of royal mummies, two of them known as the Elder Lady and the Younger Lady were initially proposed as candidates for Nefertiti. DNA tests later confirmed the Elder Lady as Tia Akhenaten's mother. The Younger Lady turned out to be Tutankhamun's mother and a daughter of Amenhotep III in Tyre. Nefertiti, who does not fit those genetic relationships, was ruled out. Attention then shifted to another group burial, KV-21, where two female mummies lie dismembered by looters. One of them, dubbed KV-21B, has a bent arm in the queenly pose and DNA indicating she belongs to the royal line. Unfortunately, the genetic data is too degraded to match her conclusively to any known individuals. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue came in 2015. British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves examined high-resolution scans of the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb and noticed linear traces suggesting hidden doorways. He theorized that the tomb may have been carved originally for Nefertiti and hastily extended for Tutankhamun, leaving her burial chamber sealed behind painted plaster. The hypothesis set off a media frenzy. Radar scans were conducted. Authorities initially claimed to detect voids, but follow-up studies were inconclusive. The notion of a secret chamber remains unproven, though many still hope. Meanwhile, historians debate the identity of Dakamunzu, the widowed Egyptian queen who wrote to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I, asking for a son to marry. Candidates include Nefertiti, Meritaten, and Ankhesenamun. If Nefertiti was indeed Dakamunzu, she may have survived Akhenaten and ruled briefly as pharaoh under another name before vanishing. The elusive tomb of Nefertiti keeps archaeologists, geneticists, and amateurs awake at night. Finding her would illuminate the end of the Amarna era, clarify succession, and perhaps reveal her visage in death. But there is a certain poetry to her absence. Nefertiti was a queen who reimagined Egyptian art, who may have briefly ruled as king, who defied conventions. That she continues to defy discovery feels somehow fitting. For now, she remains a masterpiece in a museum and a question mark in the desert, urging us to keep digging both in the ground and in the archives of history. The flight of the Saqqara bird. In a display case at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo rests a small wooden bird that has launched flights of fancy far beyond its size. The object is carved from sycamore with a straight tapered body, flat tail, and broad wings spanning 18 centimeters. It was unearthed in 1898 from a tomb in Saqqara, the vast necropolis near Memphis, and dates to around 200 BCE. To some, it is no more than a toy or votive offering. To others, it is evidence that the ancients understood the principles of flight millennia before the Wright brothers. The figure's design is undeniably aerodynamic. It lacks the stylized features of a falcon statue, and its tail sits horizontal like a modern glider's stabilizer. In the 1960s, an Egyptian physician named Khalil Messiha proposed that the Saqqara bird was a model of a flying machine. He imagined that the Egyptians had built full-sized versions, and that knowledge of their construction was preserved in forgotten papyri. The idea took off in popular culture. Replicas were fashioned from balsa wood, fitted with vertical stabilizers not present on the original, and shown to glide through the air. Documentaries linked the bird to the Dendera reliefs and other alleged hints of ancient aeronautics. A closer examination grounds such claims. The Saqqara bird is heavy for its size and lacks a vertical tail, making it unstable. Even with a vertical stabilizer, added replicas barely glide and require a running start. The original lacks any decoration or inscription that would link it to an aircraft. In contrast, Egyptologists note that falcons were sacred to Horus, and bird figures were common in tombs as representations of the soul or Ba. The bird could have been a child's toy spun through the air for amusement. It might have been mounted atop a mast as a weather vane or attached to a ceremonial boat used in festival processions. Reliefs in the Temple of Khonsu depict similar birds on ships, their wings catching the breeze. The Saqqara bird endures because it speaks to our imagination. In its elegant form, we see our own dreams of flight reflected back from antiquity. Perhaps the ancient craftsman who carved it was simply trying to capture the essence of a bird in motion, a vision of grace and freedom. Or perhaps it did soar briefly, thrown into the air by a child or lifted by the wind as a temple boat glided on the Nile. We may never know for sure. The little wooden bird invites us to ponder the line between innovation and symbolism, reminding us that sometimes mystery is a matter of perspective. It hovers in a space between myth and reality, carrying with it our desire to believe that the past held secrets as wondrous as those we imagine today. The ancient murder of Gebelein. Long before the first pharaohs unified Egypt, a young man met a violent end in the desert and was buried in the sand. His grave lay undisturbed for over 5 millennia, until in 1896, archaeologist Wallace Budge purchased several naturally mummified bodies from locals at Gebelein. The most striking of these, nicknamed Ginger for the tufts of auburn hair still clinging to his scalp, was placed in the British Museum. Visitors marveled at his contracted fetal position and remarkably preserved skin, unaware that he carried with him a chilling secret. For decades, Ginger lay in his glass case, silently sharing the gallery with gilded sarcophagi. Then in 2012, researchers performed a CT scan as part of a project to learn more about the museum's human remains. The scans revealed a clean puncture wound beneath his left shoulder blade. The weapon had entered with such force that it shattered a rib and pierced his lung. There were no signs of healing indicating the injury was fatal. The absence of defensive wounds suggested he had been taken by surprise, stabbed from behind, perhaps by someone he knew. Analysis of his bones indicated he was around 18 to 20 years old at the time of death, physically robust and healthy. He had been murdered. This discovery transformed the way we view Gobelin Man. Suddenly, he was not simply a relic of prehistoric burial practices, but the victim of the earliest known homicide in Egypt. It raised a host of questions. What circumstances led to his death? Was it the result of a personal feud, a crime of passion, or an ambush by raiders? Was this young man a hunter, a herder, a warrior? The arid sands of Gobelin preserve his body, but not the story of his life. The murder also speaks to the realities of life in pre-dynastic Egypt. It reminds us that interpersonal violence predates cities and states. The beautiful pottery and stone palettes of the period often feature scenes of conflict, men wrestling bound captives, animals attacking humans. Ginger's wound provides physical evidence that those scenes were not merely symbolic. His burial, simple and solitary, suggests that his community honored him, despite the violent nature of his death. They placed him in the earth in the fetal position, common to the time perhaps, with some grave goods that were not collected by Budge and are now lost. Standing before the display today, one sees more than just a mummy. You see a person frozen at the moment of his demise, his left shoulder forever marked by a blade. You imagine the hand that wielded it and the motive behind it. His namelessness adds to the tragedy, turning him into an everyman of prehistory. Will we ever know who killed him or why? Probably not. But his story invites empathy and underscores how archaeology can humanize the distant past, giving voice to individuals whose lives would otherwise remain anonymous in the sands. The mystery of Libyan desert glass. Across the vast emptiness of the eastern Sahara, polished shards of translucent yellow-green glass lie scattered like a field of gems. Some pieces are small pebbles. Others weigh more than a kilogram. This Libyan desert glass, or Great Sand Sea glass, is unlike anything else on Earth. Composed almost entirely of silica with traces of zircon and meteoritic metals, it has a purity and clarity unmatched by volcanic obsidian. Its origin has baffled geologists for decades and inspired tales of ancient cataclysms. The glass was known to prehistoric peoples. Neolithic craftsmen napped it into tools and arrowheads. One of the most famous pieces sits in the pectoral of Tutankhamun, carved into the shape of a scarab beetle. For the boy king's jewelers to use the material, it must have been prized even in the Bronze Age. Bedouins called the fragments falcon's teardrops and collected them as curiosities. Western scientists only began studying them seriously in the early 20th century. Early hypotheses suggested the glass formed from lightning strikes, fusing sand, or from volcanic activity. But lightning could not explain the glass's wide distribution, and there are no volcanoes nearby. The most compelling theories center on cosmic events. Some researchers propose that a meteorite exploded above the desert in a massive airburst, similar to the Tunguska event in 1908, releasing enough heat to melt sand across a broad area. Others argue that a meteor struck the ground, creating an impact crater and throwing molten sand outward. Evidence has been found for both scenarios, the presence of a mineral called rhyodite, which only forms under extreme pressures typical of impacts, supports the crater theory. Yet, the lack of a definitive crater and the distribution pattern could fit an airburst. The debate remains unresolved, in part because the Sahara's shifting sands may hide or erode the telltale crater. Whatever its birth, the glass speaks of unimaginable energy. To melt sand into clear, high-purity glass temperatures must exceed 1600 degrees Celsius. The resulting blobs cooled quickly, trapping bubbles and flow lines inside. Over millions of years, wind and erosion exposed the glass on the desert surface. Its color can range from pale lemon to deep amber, sometimes glowing translucent green in the sunlight. Holding a piece feels like holding a piece of crystallized lightning or fossilized sunlight. For modern scientists, Libyan desert glass is a window into Earth's interactions with extraterrestrial forces. It informs our understanding of impact physics and the dangers posed by near-Earth objects. For storytellers, it evokes images of gods hurling fire from the sky. As we walk the dunes where ancient explosions once turned sand to glass, we are reminded that our planet is not a closed system. It participates in a larger cosmic dance, with occasional sparks that leave lasting marks in unexpected places. The desert glass lies quiet now, but its existence hints at the dramatic events that shaped not only the Sahara, but also our understanding of how fragile and dynamic Earth can be. As our journey through Egypt's enigmas draws to a close, we're left with more questions than answers. We've wandered through sunken cities, peered into sealed tombs, and held ancient glass that once flowed like fire. Each mystery reminds us how much of the past remains hidden beneath sand and sea, waiting for curious minds and patient hands. Perhaps that's the greatest allure, not the solution, but the pursuit itself. Which story resonated with you? Do you lean toward scientific explanations or enjoy the whispers of legend? Share your thoughts, and remember, some secrets are only uncovered when we dare to keep asking.